Hi Marske and welcome back to my channel. Today we're going to do a classic reading wrap-up. I have a lot of books to talk about. You're going to get some fantasy, some non-fiction, a lot of queer romances as usual. And I find the selection very eclectic, very interesting. So without further ado, let's just get on with it. The first thing that I want to talk about is Thread of Angels by Rebecca Roanhorse, who is an author that I love and admire. Her stuff is always very imaginative and her characters always have a certain je ne sais quoi about them, so it's interesting to read their journeys. And Thread of Angels was not an exception. In the center of the story is a woman named Celeste. She's a descendant of the fallen angels and her species are called Fallen. She has a sister who's also fallen and who gets in a serious trouble because she allegedly killed an archangel. Someone has to represent her in court, and because they both are from a marginalized group and are looked down upon in the society that they live in, Celeste decides to take the role of her sister's advocate and make sure that she doesn't go to prison. The world of this novella was very imaginative. I was very curious about all the species that lived in this land and the very intricate lore of the story, but also at the same time it was quite grounded in that the main conflict in the story and the main theme is the relationship between the two sisters. Celeste lived with her dad and grew up with relative privilege, and Mariel was left with her mom and grew up in the slums of 𝕊𝕍𝕀𝔸𝕃. So there's a lot of guilt and unspoken stuff in their relationship. I really enjoyed the dynamic. Though we don't see Mariel much, we only hear about her and see her in the memories through Celeste's point of view. I think the conflict was very well fleshed out. I gave this book 4 stars and I think it's gonna make a very banging Halloween read. Let's move on to our first queer romance of this video, which is gonna be Alone by AJ Noyes. I talked a little bit about it in my previous videos. I think I talked about it in my Thailand reading vlog because I was reading it in Thailand. And I also talked about it in my queer romance recommendations recently. So if you have not seen those 2 videos, I'm going to leave the links as I usually do. The premise of this book is very fascinating. I have not read any romances with the same plot, and I definitely have not read any queer or, in this case, sapphic romances with this premise. It's unique, and on paper it sounds like a sci-fi thriller or a thriller. I really loved the idea behind it, and I'm hunting for these types of books. I want to read more original stuff in romance and specifically in sapphic romance. Alone by AJ Noyes also follows a Celeste. I guess Celeste is a popular name, and she comes from a very impoverished, very abusive background. Her mom was an alcoholic and she had to fend off for herself and her little sister. When she became older, she struggled with making connections and building meaningful relationships, so for most part of her life she was alone. It's not surprised that when she sees a flyer offering a ton of money for participating in an experiment, she actually considers it and goes to meet the company conducting it. Celeste is told that she has to live alone in the middle of the woods without any contact to any humans, without human images, without human voices for 3 years or more, depending on how the experiment goes. And at the end of it, she's going to get a lot of money that can actually change her life. Since she doesn't have anyone to worry about her, she agrees and takes on that job. We see her for the first time closer to the end of the experiment, and it is downright dystopian. She already is experiencing a lot of negative symptoms due to isolation. She hears voices of her sister, of her mom, of some people that she met in the past. She sees hallucinations, and during one of those hallucination trips she sees a wild animal outside of her house, so she decides to kill it. When she actually shoots the animal, she realizes that It was not an animal at all. It was a young woman, and she has to carry her into her house and take care of her because otherwise she's going to bleed out and die. It's a wild concept. From that point on, they're both stuck in the house, and Celeste is between the rock and the hard place because she has to tell her observers that she has a person in the house and the experiment is now invalid. But she spends so much time on this experiment that it's hard for her to come clean. She's afraid that she's not going to get the money. At the same time, she also notices that being in a company of another human is very rewarding, and she doesn't want to let this woman go. And she starts experiencing feelings for her because of not having close relationships with any other women, being stuck in that house. This story is such a trip. It does feel very dystopian, and I really enjoyed the fucked upness and the dark aspect of it. I love it when in thrillers and generally in books we explore the intricacies. I love it when in thrillers and generally in fiction we explore the intricacies of the human psychology. It was such an interesting story, more so because of the experiment aspect rather than the romance aspect. There was only one thing that I didn't like about the story, the romance specifically, is how little groveling there was. Because I, as a petty bitch, would have never. It was a very interesting look into human psychology. It was a very interesting premise for a romance, so I do recommend it, even though I gave it 4 stars. Then I listened to a non-fiction book about cults. I do listen to those a lot. This topic is a specific hyperfixation that I have. We all know that by now. I read Cool to Love Story by Alexandra Amor. And it's about a Canadian cult with a female cult leader, which is quite rare. It's written by one of the ex-members of the cult, as those books usually are, and it stood apart from the other books that I've read about cults because the main focus was not exactly on how Alexandra Moore got into this cult in the first place or how she left it, although those two things were also part of the story, but it specifically focused on how hard it is to leave a cult when you have someone there who you genuinely really love and with whom you see your future and want to build a family. Her partner was also in the cult with her, and at the moment when this book came out, he still remained in the cult, even though I believe the cult leader died. The nuance that I find interesting in the stories is how some people don't leave the cult even when the cult leader dies, and how willing people are to stay even when everything falls apart objectively because of the sunken costs, because of how much time they spend on this pursuit, and because honestly they don't know anything else outside of it. They don't see a life for themselves outside of the cult. I listened to the audiobook, it was very well written, and I have not given this book any stars because I don't give autobiographies and biographies stars. It feels weird to judge people's lives with stars because who cares? So that was our nonfiction breaks. No more nonfiction coming, but a lot of queer romances. Let's talk about the MM romance that I really liked, Going Public by Hudson Lee. This book really surprised me. It's a sequel to... I don't remember the name of that book, but I also liked it. And this one had so much more to offer somehow. I expected it to be just a PA boss romance, office romance, but it surprisingly had so much suspense, and I absolutely do not have anything to complain about. The story follows Raymond, who is responsible for background checks on firms his company is planning to buy or already bought. His firm recently bought a factory, and he has to go and check on it and see if everything is in order, tax-wise, documents-wise, if all the people there are in their own places, or maybe they need to fire some staff and hire new people. He decides to go on this trip with his personal assistant named Elvin. Elvin has been in love with him for many years now. Elvin considers his crush to be hopeless. He doesn't expect Raymond to respond in any way, so he doesn't even tell him that he is in love with him. They go to this factory together, which is located in a provincial town, I believe, in Canada, and they are faced with something very shady. I'm not going to spoil the story for you, but it was genuinely so gripping. I love the relationship between the heroes, and also how they were so opposite and so complementary. They come from very different backgrounds. Raymond comes from a very rich family with whom he cut ties. They were very neglectful of him when he was a child. So in his adulthood, he's very lonely. And Elvin comes from a very poor, very underprivileged family with a lot of kids, and he had to be the third parent. So he's a big worrywart, he's very anxious, but at the same time, he's very responsible, he's very capable, he's very organized. So there is a larger suspenseful plot that I found enjoyable, but there are also a few minor conflicts between the characters because of their opposite point of views and their very different backgrounds. This was a very enjoyable romance, far more enjoyable than I expected. It hit all the points that it needed to hit for me to really love it. There was so much connection and vulnerability between the characters, and you know that it is literally kryptonite for me. A book that I talked about a lot already on my channel, A Marvellous Light by Freya Marske. We're going to talk about it again because I really loved it. I gave it 5 stars and it was absolutely deserved. I was so obsessed with this book. I'm still a little bit obsessed with it. I'm going to read the sequel soon, and the couple in the sequel is going to be an FF couple, which is always better personally for me because I love the ladies. So, A Marvellous Light is a historical romantasy. I want to say it's a historical romantasy. I'm going to recommend this book series to a specific group of people that I'm a part of. Just know, if you recognize yourself in that group, I'm also in that group. If you really liked Carry On by Rainbow Rowell, but you wanted it to be an adult book. If you liked a dreary fan fiction that is specifically set years after Hogwarts and is about a case that Draco and Harry go on to investigate together because they now work together and are very reluctant about it. If you love The Magicians but wanted it to be explicitly and undeniably gay, this book series is for you. A Marvellous Light follows a young baronet named Robin, whose parents die and leave him and his little sister a lot of debt. They have to figure out how to fend for themselves. So Robin gets a job in the office through his connections. He doesn't really know what this job is going to entail. He just doesn't expect anything bad to happen. But when he gets to the job, he is attacked by a man without a face. This is how Robin is introduced to magic. It turns out that this is a job of a magical liaison. A person in his position has to report possible magical situations and things that are happening in the human world so the magical society can deal with them. And the person that held this position prior to him mysteriously disappeared. So everyone is looking for that dude, and the bad guys that put a curse on him believe that Robin knows something about it. He doesn't. He didn't even know that magic exists. The person that he has to report to, a counterpart from the magical society named Edwin, comes looking for the man as well, and instead of him he finds Robin and figures out that something is very wrong. Not only the guy disappeared, Robin was also cursed for some reason, and the curse is nothing like he'd seen in the past. Edwin and Robin band together and are trying to find the solution. They're trying to break the curse and also find the man that disappeared. This was such a fun story. It's full of adventure. It's full of plot twists. We get the bonding on the road between Edwin and Robin. Eventually, they do fall in love. It's a romance after all. The characters are so lovable. You just need to give it a few chapters. I was hooked by chapter 6 when we visit Edwin's family house and get introduced to his family. They are almost all horrible. And we get a peek into Edwin's insecurities and his childhood, the environment that he lived in. Edwin is my favorite. My heart goes to Edwin. He is my baby and I absolutely would protect him with everything that I've had. I loved it so much because all the elements of the story were so well executed. I love non-complicated magical systems. Just give me a world that looks like ours, that is a tiny bit different because there's magic in it. That's what I love, and that is what this book gave me. I also finally continued on with the sequel of Jade City. Jade War was an incredible sequel. I was glad to get back to these characters. I am notoriously a person that hates Halo. I know he's one of the most popular characters. Like, I appreciate him as a character. I think he's very complex and interesting to read about, but do I hate him? Yes, I do. Because he reminds me so much of my brother, and it's just a trigger for me. My favorite characters from the series are actually Aiden and Shay, and I love how in Jade War their stories call back to each other. They have similar trajectories, I want to say, because Shay's past is basically Aiden's present in this book. They even make similar choices about similar things. I'm trying not to spoil as much as possible. I'm just gonna say that this is a very, very strong sequel, and I really, really love the book and loved being back in that world. Maybe one day I'm going to make a full video deep diving into the series with, you know, whiteboards and clip-ons and all that jazz. One day, maybe when they'll finally release the TV show. If you're holding the Greenbone Saga TV show hostage, please release it. Release it to the public, because people want to know, people want to see it, and you announced it such a long time ago. I don't know what's going on. I need to know. If anyone has the news about the Greenbone Saga TV show, leave them in the comments down below. I want it. I've been wanting it for a while now. Another queer romance that I read recently but was actually disappointed in is the Fiancée Farce by Alexandra Bellefleur. I've read one of Alexandra Bellefleur's other FF romances and I loved it. It's one of my favorite books, but this one was something else. Now, the premise of it is ridiculous, but sometimes authors can pull off ridiculous premises as long as the story is grounded in something and is genuinely thought out. With this book, I was just shaking my head a lot, and I was wondering the whole time why it's so long. It genuinely is a very, very long book without it needing to be this long. The Fiancée Farce follows Tansy, whose father died and who's trying to keep her head above water and to save her bookshop. Her stepmother actually wants to sell the bookshop. Tansy is a big lover of the romance genre, but her personal life is a mess. She doesn't have a significant other, she barely goes to dates, and she's hounded by her relatives about it until she tells them a lie. She says that she's dating a woman from the cover of one of her romance novels, and it all goes well until her stepsister decides to marry Tansy's ex-bully, and whose sister is actually the model from the cover. They attend the engagement party, and the model, whose name is Gemma, actually comes as well. So Tansy is in a bit of an awkward situation because she never has spoken to this woman and she needs Gemma to play along. Now, as if this was not a ridiculous scenario already, Tansy needs a wife to claim her inheritance. So they decide to help each other and pretend that they are getting married. Actually, to go through with the marriage. So Gemma would get the inheritance, share it with Tansy, and Tansy could buy the bookshop. I feel breathless. This was quite a doozy. If that was not off-putting already, imagine this ridiculous plot being stretched to so many pages. This book felt like a 400-page book, and it was absolutely not warranted. The chemistry between the characters was there, but it was also very surface level based. Gemma is a player, and a few chapters into the story, she falls head over heels with Tansy and drops all her rules, all her bad behavior stuff for Tansy immediately. She is no longer a player, she is there and she is committed. This is a fairy tale, y'all. This is a fairy tale. And the interesting part about the plot that added to the ridiculousness of how things shifted so quickly is the fact that Gemma also has a very clingy ex. They were best friends when they were children, but their relationship developed into something more, and Gemma warned the girl that she doesn't want anything serious, but things escalated and her ex actually started wanting something more serious. After some conversations, they decided to stay friends, but it clearly isn't working. Now, why a girl that Gemma met 2 seconds ago can turn everything around for her without much happening really, and the girl that she's been friends with forever and had a complicated relationship with, can't. This was a choice, the choice that I didn't really get, and the story was so long. I swear to God, I was listening to the audio and thinking to myself, when this is going to end, because I am tired. I am tired of listening to it. No contemporary romance has to be more than 10 hours. This is my unpopular take. Just please edit. Please edit the books and edit them well. The last thing that I want to talk about is the Green Creek series by Klune. Yay! I finished reading the series. I have a whole in-depth reading vlog on my channel. If you have not seen it, because YouTube is playing games with me. It's playing games with me and I'm not happy about it. If you have not seen it, I'm going to link it. It's a reading vlog that took a lot of my time, that I put a lot of effort into, and if you have not read the full series yet, you can still watch it because I actually marked the big spoilers in that video. But if you want to be safe, and I would prefer you to be safe and not yell at me in the comments, then just bookmark this video, continue reading the series, and then watch the reading vlog. I had a lot of fun with that series. It definitely had stronger and weaker books, and a lot of stuff in it surprised me. Klune is the master of the found family trope, and I'm more and more convinced of that. After reading more and more of his books, I really loved the pack dynamic in the story. It's a werewolf romance. I love the majority of the plot. The couple dynamics were interesting. The story overall, like the scope of the story, the foreshadowing, how the conflicts were wrapped up, really enjoyed the journey overall. So I definitely had some complaints and some critiques for it, but at the end of the day, this book series is now near and dear to my heart, and I genuinely really loved reading the series. So this is it for the video. These are all the books that I wanted to talk about. If you read any of this and you have opinions, leave them in the comments down below. If you want to share the book that you recently read and loved, also tell me about it in the comments down below. If you reached this part of the video, leave autumnal emojis in the comments, and I will see you soon with another video. But until then,